I'm Mark Golub, and in the news coming out of Israel, a certain kind of upsetting criticism of non-Orthodox Judaism, especially of Reform Judaism. The Minister of Religious Affairs, David Azoulay, actually said that Reform Jews are not Jews. He was speaking on Israeli IDF Army radio, and he said, "A Reform Jew, from the moment he stops following Jewish law, I cannot allow myself to say that he is a Jew. These are Jews that have lost their way, and we must ensure that every Jew returns to the fold of Judaism and accept everyone with love and joy." Unfortunately, this is becoming a pattern of late out of the state of Israel. And what bothered many people on the American Jewish scene is that this was a minister, a formal member of the Israeli government and the Israeli cabinet. And to comment on what this means to American Jewry, we're most pleased to have on our phones from Boston, Massachusetts, an individual who's been profoundly involved in Jewish life here in America and really throughout the world, Jay Ruderman, who is the president of the Ruderman Family Foundation. Jay, thank you so much for giving us a moment.
Thanks, Mark, for inviting me.
So Jay, in general, what's your personal response and why has this affected you when you hear some of the things coming out of Israel today?
Well, one of the things that our foundation is really focused on is educating Israelis about the American Jewish community, mainly from a strategic point of view, that the United States is very important for Israel's security, that the American Jewish community has played an outsized role in ensuring that the U.S. is strongly behind Israel, and yet Israelis really don't understand the American Jewish community. Mm-hmm. They don't understand the pluralism, the Reform community, the conservative community is not strongly represented in Israel. They don't have the numbers. They don't have the political power there. And I think that among Israelis, there's a misconception about the American Jewish connection to Israel and how that might be changing. And so we've brought 3 delegations of Knesset members, 2 delegations of leading Israeli journalists, and established the first academic program on the American Jewish community at any Israeli university.
I'm sorry, where was that, Jay?
At the University of Haifa.
Wonderful. Keep going.
Yeah. So, when I saw the comments, what struck me was this is just not good for the relationship. Mm-hmm. And, I'm an observant Jew. However, I realize that Reform Jews are an important part of the Jewish community.
Yes.
So our comment was, these comments have to be disavowed. The Prime Minister has to walk away from them and say they don't represent his government.
And actually, Prime Minister Netanyahu has done just that. Were you in touch with the Prime Minister's office yourself?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
But I respect what he did. I respect that he's walked away from it.
Yes. By the way, it's very important that we mention that Prime Minister Netanyahu has publicly and formally disavowed what the minister has said and any denigration of Reform Jews. One of the things that concerns me, Jay, is whether this will have an impact on the way American Jewry feels about the state of Israel or relates to the state of Israel. You've done some profound work in a relationship between American Jewry and Israel. What's your sense of what the fallout might be? And I'm not trying to lead you, Jay. It may be that you don't feel there'll be any fallout, but I do want your assessment.
Well, I don't know if there will be a fallout. That remains to be seen. But, the people that do some of the heavy lifting on ensuring a strong pro-Israel relationship in America are Reform Jews. And I think if they paid attention to the way Israeli officials were speaking about them, I think it could have a disastrous impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You've acknowledged that you personally are an observant Jew. Do you have any problems here in America with either conservative Judaism, Reform Judaism, or for that matter, any expression of non-Orthodox Judaism, Reconstructionist Judaism? Do you have any problem at all with any of these movements?
No, I don't see how they're a threat.
Yes.
I mean, because I'm observant and I send my kids to an Orthodox day school, why is someone's observance as a Reformed Jew or a conservative Jew a threat to me? I just don't get it. And I also don't understand how Israelis or Israeli officials feel like it would be a threat to Israel.
Mm-hmm. You know that there is at the moment a sort of a move back, given the recent election and the recent makeup, the present makeup now of the coalition government, where Shas and United Torah Judaism, both ultra-Orthodox parties, have a disproportionate power within the coalition government. And so recently we also saw a step back, at least that's the way it's being described, a step back in terms of the conversion process in Israel, something that has upset Natan Sharansky of the Jewish Agency very much and also has concerned Jewish leaders. I'm wondering how you reacted in general to, number one, the power that has now been placed inside the ultra-religious parties and how it seems to be shifting power on the social scene back to the chief rabbinate, which is ultra-Orthodox, and how you feel in general the conversion change might affect the state of Israel going forward.
Well, I think that's a fact of life in Israel. I think that there's no separation between religion and politics, and there are religious parties in Israel, and they have numbers and they have power. And, I don't have an issue with it. That's sort of the reality as it is. My point is, this is not a religious issue. Mm-hmm. I'm not out to argue halakha with anyone. I'm not out to argue, someone needs to change or compromise their religious views. What we're saying is that the American Jewish community is a very powerful community impacting the security of Israel, and that Reform Jews and conservative Jews play a very significant role in many Jewish organizations that impact the U.S.-Israel relationship. They have key positions in the general American community, and that Israelis have to understand that these powerful political communities are part of the American Jewish community, that they have to learn to speak to these communities with respect. Mm-hmm. And when you make a statement and you say, Reformed Jews are not really Jews, when there are key Reformed Jews in positions of power in America and in American Jewish organizations, it's just not smart strategically. I think that if you have someone who has a key relationship with a U.S. senator or a member of Congress and who's constantly speaking to the member of Congress and telling them why support for Israel is crucial for the future of America and the relationship is an important relationship, if this individual then thinks that Israel doesn't respect him as a Jew, mm-hmm. doesn't respect his form of identification, I think that that's a potential strategic problem for Israel. And I just don't think enough Israelis in positions of power are aware of that potential disaster that could fall on them if American Jews turned away from Israel. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily see that as happening, yes. But I just think that we have to be more respectful of each other.
I love the way you say it, Jay. By the way, you understand that this issue goes in some way to the philosophical question of what is a Jew and who is a Jew. And some people, in my view, mistakenly believe the term Jew refers to a member of a religion, as opposed to a member of what is, in essence, a large and glorious family that has members living in various countries all across the world at the moment, the two major centers being in the state of Israel and the United States. And it looks like Israel will be now, hopefully forever, the major capital of the Jewish family, the Jewish people. When a minister in the Israeli government suggests that a Reform Jew is not a Jew, he's really making a mistake about what a Jew is. A Jew, it has nothing to do with a person's degree of observance or involvement even in synagogue life. A Jew is somebody born to a Jewish mother, in some movements of American Judaism, to a Jewish mother or a Jewish father, or someone who chooses to become Jewish by converting. And the Jewish tradition, Jewish law is clear. If you're born a Jew, or if you choose to become a Jew, once you are a Jew, whatever you do or do not do in terms of religious practice, religious observance, has nothing to do on your status as a Jew. You are a Jew even if you, at some later time, choose to convert to another religion. If you're born a Jew, you're always a Jew. You're always a member of the Jewish people and the Jewish family. And if one day somebody who converts out of Judaism wants to convert back into Judaism, there's no reinduction ceremony. You're a Jew. You were mistaken for a period of time, and you have come back to who you are. And so, Jay, I want you to comment from your perspective on this, again, this philosophical question, what is a Jew? And you don't have to agree with me, but I'm suggesting that the very fact that a minister of the Israeli cabinet would suggest that a Reform Jew is not a Jew because he does not follow halakha means that he is mistaken fundamentally about what a Jew is. What is your sense?
Well, I think that that's why the comments were so bizarre and as the Prime Minister said, hateful. Because he wasn't saying these people aren't Jewish. He's saying, they're... Well, he wasn't saying... He was saying that their form of Judaism is a threat, that them being Reform, he doesn't consider themselves Jewish. So according to halakha, his argument is a little bit weak. But it doesn't really... I don't really understand the threat. I think one of the things that's happening is in Israel, when people say reformim, they feel that the reform movement is a threat to their way of life. It doesn't really make sense to me. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. And also, if you look at the American Jewish community, we're such a diverse Jewish community. People identify Jewishly as Orthodox, conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, cultural, and there are people who feel very strongly about their Judaism. They may not be religious or observant, but to them, being Jewish is important. Israel is important. I think Israel needs to understand how to communicate with these people. I think it starts with understanding the American Jewish community, which they really don't. And that's why we've taken these missions of Knesset members and journalists to try to help them understand. I think, Minister Azoulay was on Raze Barkai's radio show on Galei Tzahal. Raze Barkai was here with us in America a couple of weeks ago. And I think that really helped him understand that there's a diverse American Jewish community. And, one of the things he said on the radio was, how could you say that Reform Jews aren't Jewish? They're more Jewish than I am. Mm-hmm. They go to synagogue. I don't go to synagogue. So, I think that it starts with education and it ends in respect. I'm not a rabbi and I don't want to talk about halakha.
Yes.
Religiously there are issues of halakha. But in terms of the strategic interest of Israel, Israel needs the United States, and it needs to make friends with the American Jewish community. It can't just assume the relationship is going to happen, into the future without any bumps. We are an evolving Jewish community, and we identify differently than Jews do in Israel.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you've spoken with many, many Israelis, Jay, and it tends to be a popular perception in the state of Israel. You'll hear often Israelis say, I'm not religious, I'm not observant, I don't go to shul, I don't go to a synagogue, but if I did, I would go to the Orthodox because even though I don't want to be Orthodox, I consider Orthodoxy to be the authentic expression of Judaism. And one of the reasons that's true, and you alluded to it a little while ago, is that there are not large numbers of non-Orthodox Jews from America. The model that we have of Jewish pluralism is not a model that most Israelis see. And Jay, some of what the critics say is, until there are enough Reform Jews and Masorti, conservative Jews, and non-Orthodox Jews with non-Orthodox congregations and communities in the state of Israel, there's something slightly artificial about American Jewry standing over against Israeli Jewry and telling Israeli Jewry what kind of Jews to be. You've made this a strategic issue. The power of your point is that there is a very important alliance between Israel and the American Jewish community, which supports the State of Israel, not only grassroots, but obviously in terms of work done by organizations like AIPAC. And Jay, quite honestly, the same kind of work that your foundation does. But I am asking you now whether you have any comment on the fact that there are those in Israel who say, Jay, if you want it to be a change, there should, even though you're not a non-Orthodox Jew, you should encourage the Reform movement, the conservative movement through the Masorti movement in Israel to be greater in numbers, and then the power will follow. What would you say?
Well, first of all, I think they're trying. All right. I think that there's, huge outreach efforts by the Reform movement, conservative movements to grow their movement,
Absolutely.
to attract Israelis.
Absolutely. And they've been successful.
I think that they are attracting more and more Israelis.
Yes.
But, living in reality, I'm not sure you're going to see massive numbers of Israelis becoming conservative and Reform Jews. I'm not sure you're going to see massive aliyah from the United States, where Reform Jews and conservative Jews are moving to Israel. I'm all in favor of aliyah. I myself made aliyah. But I think before we get there is an issue of education. I mean, I think that we can educate Israelis about the American Jewish community, that they can understand strategically why it's important. I mean, listen, the Prime Minister certainly understands this. I think that's why he so quickly walked away from Minister Azoulay's comments. And I think that's why Naftali Bennett also on his Facebook page today walked away from these comments, because they understand how powerful and significant the American Jewish community is, and they understand this community. However, you have behind Netanyahu and Bennett and Isaac Herzog, you have a great number of Knesset members who really don't know the American Jewish community. Mm-hmm. And they think they know it, but they really don't. So I think we can start with education. We have brought 17 members of Knesset. We've brought 16 leading Israeli journalists here. In the master's program here at University of Haifa, we've had so far 50 students go through the program in 2 years. And so I think with education, I think we can at least sensitize Israelis to what the American Jewish community is and why it's significant to their lives and how it's different. I'll point out one other thing. There's a cultural thing that's going on here. If you look at the American community, I think the most important value that we have, or the values that we hold dear as Americans, are our freedoms.
Yes.
We want our freedoms to be honored, and whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, these are key values for Americans. Israel is a much more tribal culture. It's a culture that's under threat from its surrounding enemies, and so it has an official rabbanut. So for Israelis to think that orthodoxy is the natural traditional way of identifying, and even if I'm secular, that's the true form of Judaism. What they should know is that not all Americans think the same.
Jay, you have made a brilliant contribution, not only to American Jewish life, but to Israeli life. When did you make Aliyah, Jay?
I made Aliyah in 2005 and raised a family there. And I'm sort of in two countries. I should tell you that we have two offices, one in Boston and one in Rehovot in Israel, with staff in both places. So I feel I have a good finger on the pulse of both communities.
Well, good for you, and I hope you understand how wonderful it is that you would give us some time. Very often, the American Jewish community does not get to hear from someone who brings a perspective that you have as both an American Jew and as an Israeli, so it is most kind of you. It is not a problem that is going to go away quickly, but I think when people such as yourself speak out as forcefully and as clearly, it helps American Jewry understand what the issue is. And I think you agree with me. The last thing I want to see is any non-Orthodox Jew distance him or herself from the State of Israel, because there's some narishkeit going on in the State of Israel, even if it is offensive. It does not go to the root of the bond between Jews who live in America and Jews who live in Israel. So I don't want in any way this, what I consider to be utter nonsense, just nonsense, to get in the way. At the same time, it's very important for people like yourself to try to put this in perspective, and I'm very grateful that you did so, and I hope I get to speak to you often.
I appreciate it, Mark. I just will add one other thing, that, we're critical today of Israel and Israeli leaders for dissing a significant stream of American Judaism. However, as Americans, we also have a role that when we fly to Israel on our missions and when Israelis come here, yes, we're going to talk about the threats to Israel, about Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon and in Gaza and Syria and all the threats that Israel is facing. But we should also be talking to Israelis about our own community.
Yes.
And who we are as Americans and how we identify Jewishly. Because I think too many organizations and too many Jewish machers, when they go over to Israel and when they host generals and politicians here, don't talk about the American Jewish community at all. Mm-hmm. And we can't give ourselves a pass. I mean, we have to speak up and say, listen, there's something going on in this community among younger Jews about how they're connecting to Israel, about how we identify religiously, and we want to talk about ourselves. Mm-hmm. We need to do that, and we don't do it enough.
You are so right, and I'm telling you now, the next time you come to the New York area, you have to come and sit at my table, and we'll discuss some of these issues in greater depth. Right now, I simply thank you for giving us some time on JBS. You be well, and kol tuva hatzlacha.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Be very well. That was the thoughts of Jay Ruderman, who, of course, is the president of the Ruderman Family Foundation that's been doing extraordinary work on a whole host of levels. They're involved with the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism, dealing with making synagogues more open to and hospitable to those who are handicapped. And he's working, as you heard, on major initiatives having to do with bridging the gap, any gap that might exist between American Jewry and the State of Israel. So, kol hakavod to Jay Ruderman. My thanks, as always, to Sloan Copeland, our director, Serge Goldberg, our production coordinator, the JBS Associate Director, Dara Golub, and our producer for this edition of the news, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.